Good evening. I'm Cory Morgan. Welcome to The Pipeline. This is the Western Standard's weekly news and opinion panel where we go into our top stories, break them down, analyze them, tell you what to think about them, or at least suggest what to think about them. And just get to the bottom of these issues. And there's so many going on all the time. We're going to get to those right away. I'm just going to start with reminding you of our sponsor. That's how we stay an independent news outlet, guys. And that sponsor is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. If you have firearms, you want to get firearms, doesn't matter why, whether you're a hunter, a target shooter, a collector, you got a government that's trying to take them away from you. They want to take away that right and ability to do so. And if you do not stand up for yourself, you will lose that right. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association is there for that. You've got to join them, though. You've got to be a member. There's safety in numbers. This way they can lobby on your behalf. They can stand up for you, and they will listen to you even when the government won't. Check them out. Their website's great. Lots of depth, lots of resources. Canadian Shooting Sports Association, their website, cssa-cila.org. Take out a membership. It's well worth the investment in yourself and your rights. All right, but we got so much to cover today. I want to get right to it. We got some stuff that's been breaking. This may be a day later for some of the viewers there, but still this has been breaking all morning here. Dave, we have, I should introduce you guys. Dave Naylor, our news editor. Nigel Hannaford, our opinion editor. I'm just so eager to get to things as they've been working up that I'd forgotten. But everybody knows who you guys are already.
Cory.
It's as they say, you need no introduction.
Exactly.
Right.
So we don't get one.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, Cory, it looks like we had a terrorist attack at the Canadian border crossing in Buffalo, the Rainbow Bridge, Buffalo on one side, Niagara Falls on the other. We're still in the sort of fog of war, trying to figure out what exactly happened, but it appears there was a car on the U.S. side that was driving towards Canada, was flagged for further inspections, and then drove headfirst into the customs building, exploding, killing the two men inside and injuring minor injuries to an American border official. U.S. officials immediately went on high alert. All the bridges were closed from Ontario into New York State. U.S. Joint Task Force officers took control of the bridges, and now the investigation is well underway. Where did these people come from? Who are they? What were they trying to do? Were they trying to blow up the checkpoint, or were they trying to smuggle these explosives into Canada and do something nasty there? But a very, very concerning development today, Cory.
Yeah, well, and Nigel, I mean, it's so early right now, it's hard to speculate, but the potential repercussions of something like this are massive. I mean, a terrorist, if it was the case of something like that, even if it's an individual or a pair of individuals, crossing borders, potentially killing people, I mean, this could lead to a lot of border issues and security for quite some time.
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, production in the auto industry straddles the border. And the same car body will go backwards and forwards between plants in Detroit and Windsor, which is at the western end of Lake Erie. It's not here we're not talking about, that's not where the incident happened. Mm-hmm. But when something like this does happen, then everybody gets scared. And all of a sudden, routine operations like crossing the border with a truck full of car bodies suddenly becomes more of an issue. And when these factories are working on a just-in-time basis, it's going to affect things. It's also going to affect hundreds of thousands of people who cross the border at the American Thanksgiving. And it's going to, there are quite a few Canadians who actually work in the United States, live on one side, work on the other. They too will be, I believe it's very strong in the hospital profession down there. So all of these things are affected. Two people blow themselves up. The damage looks considerable when you see that, but they'll fix that. Mm-hmm. It's one lane out of several that accommodate traffic. The success of this operation, if you want to call it that, is the fear and confusion that it sows into every other border crossing in that part of the world. And frankly, for all we know, in this part of the world as well.
Exactly. And it's The border security has been an issue for a while now. The U.S. southern border is basically a free-for-all. The Americans have increased their complaints about the northern border with a number of nasty people that are crossing from Canada into the United States. So whichever way it goes, it's going to increase border anxiety. If these people were found to be illegal immigrants in the United States, that's going to put the pressure up on President Biden to do something about it. And Cory, you may remember about a week or so ago, there were reports that the government of Great Britain warned Canada that they were due for a terrorist attack. And our Canadian government kind of just sloughed it off. And a week or so later, here we are. So,
well, I guess we know, again, to remind everybody, go to westernstandard.news to keep on the updates. We're putting them up as fast as they happen, and every news story and things such as that. We'll continue to report on it as it unfolds. I think in a case like this, the best we can hope for is just it happened to be two lunatics, independent of anything else, and it's sort of taken care of itself, and it's not something of a wider effort going on.
Yeah, hopefully they haven't taped a pro-Hamas message before getting into their vehicle.
Yeah, to your last point about the terrorists coming from Canada, it does appear that this vehicle originated on the south, like on the American side of the border. So I would, yes, the Canadians were warned by the British, but maybe this isn't actually what they were being warned about, because we don't know yet, but this may have an entirely domestic origin within the U.S., or it may be, as you say, somebody who snuck across the southern border and decided to have a go. But what was it? You also mentioned that, and I believe I overheard this earlier on the reports, there's something like 500 nasties who entered the United States, and 450 of them were classified as having come from Canada.
Yes.
So we do not have a good reputation.
No, and this even if it didn't come from Canada, this is going to increase calls from American law people and elected officials to increase it, because they have governments in the United States have expressed high concerns about the number of people crossing illegally into the United States from Canada.
There'll be more scrutiny. I used to have to cross that border when I'd drive down to work in northern Pennsylvania, and that you could cut across down through Bradford and north of Pittsburgh. But that was a long crossing if you hit it at the wrong time, and with increased scrutiny, I can only imagine. As you said, there's an economic cost that comes with these things and fear. But, well, I guess we'll watch and wait and hope for the best. All right, well, let's get on to another disaster, and that's the federal economic update.
Very nice segue, Cory.
Yes. Chrystia Freeland's Hair of the Dog economic update. And I guess we're going to pull our Sean Polzer in to lay out a little bit of what's going on with our friends in Ottawa. Hi, Sean. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you guys?
All right. Doing all right. So have they bounced the budget yet?
Oh, I don't think they ever had. That's one thing that they've have a perfect record on, is racking up deficits ever since they were elected in 2015. After inheriting a balanced budget, mind you, and Nigel probably knows more about that than I do.
You tried hard, and we got one.
So what are some of the highlights, though, of that budget, Sean? I mean, are there any successes they can point at? I know they're going to try to, but what is it telling us from this latest, I guess, snapshot of where the finances are sitting right now?
Well, I had a hard time trying to find out any one success. If you call kind of managing the deficit and holding the line on it at around $40 billion is a success. But the one thing that struck me the most was the actual cost of servicing the accumulative deficit, partly as a result of the policies from their own Bank of Canada, where interest rates have basically quadrupled in about a year and a half. So that's putting a lot of pressure on Minister Freeland to not only try to find these new dollars for these priority areas, like housing and their environmental causes that Liberals like, but also to actually pay for it. So one of the numbers that struck out at me is that it's going to cost about $46.5 billion this year alone just to service the debt. So it becomes the largest single line item in the budget. And that number is going to rise up to over $60 billion by 28-29 fiscal year. And to put that into perspective, Canada spends about $28.5 billion on the military. a year. So we're talking, we could have triple the size of the army that we have now, meet our NATO commitments, and do all these things that the Liberals have promised to do if they had just managed to be a little more disciplined fiscally and show some fiscal restraint.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Dave, yeah, I mean, we know from our household budgets, there's nothing galls me more, pains me than interest payments. It's just flushed money. I mean, we borrow money. It's kind of a necessity of modern financing, but you want to minimize when you can. And when we're sending more on interest payments out to than our entire military budget, I mean, what a waste.
10 cents on every dollar now going to pay the interest. I think it's now time, gentlemen, that we three apologize to our children for screwing their future by running up such a debt, and these debt repayments that are going to have to be made is going to be crippling for many, many years to come.
I think the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has got a separate division. What do they call it? Generation Screwed, is it? Yeah. That's their message. Yeah, we could apologize, but wouldn't it be a hell of a lot better to just fix it?
Well, the impetus, I mean, we would remember, though, the last time budgets got balanced within Canada and moved along, even Romanow and NDP, Premier managed to balance the budget, though, was the interest payments were driving Canadians so bananas in the 90s. I mean, the interest rates were higher then, too. But all of these debts, I mean, people were seeing those numbers and they were floored. Like, that does motivate, responsible politicians. But we got Freeland.
Well, we saw Freeland lambasting Pierre Poilievre, saying all conservative talk about is austerity. Canadians don't want austerity. Well, I'm sorry, madam, but I think maybe some of us do, and I think maybe it's time all of us did.
If that is the case, then it's something we've learned in the last 8 years, because let me remind you of one thing. In the 2015 election, we had the balanced budget, and we campaigned, we being the Conservatives, on keeping it that way, maintaining a balanced budget, running a tight ship. You know who else campaigned on that? The NDP. Okay, so the Conservatives and the NDP were together on tight fiscal policy, good governance, not borrowing your way through life. It was the Liberals who actually promised that they would borrow money for 3 years and then balance the budget in the fourth. And people voted for that. And it wasn't just our generation that did so. It was actually the younger generation that swept Mr. Trudeau into power. So while I actually I get what you're saying about the generation screwed and we kind of owe them an apology and sort of thing, yes, but they actually have their own burden to bear in this. They voted for this guy.
And the polls are now showing they've changed their mind.
And boy, how about that?
How about that, eh?
Yes.
They are. Well, before I let Sean go, then, I mean, business and energy is your beat, though. Did you see much within that update, reflecting on how it might impact that or how dependent they might be on energy revenues? What did you see in there?
Well, it's funny because unlike the present Prime Minister's father, he's not trying to steal our money. He's basically trying to leave it in the ground. So no, there wasn't very much on energy specifically, or any kind of revenues or investment kind of things that they could potentially use to maybe offset some of that deficit. But there was some mention of carbon credit taxes for these carbon capture projects. These are big billion-dollar projects, and they've been promising some legislation to put through these tax credits that they've identified in previous budgets, but they haven't done so yet. And so that is apparently coming in the fall. I would imagine there's only 6 weeks left in the fall, where they're going to promise some guidelines on these investment tax credits. But I would kind of note that they were rolled in with a big, larger suite of, their pet clean electricity policies, and that somehow it looked to me that it was almost like a negotiating ploy. As you know, the federal government and the provincial governments, Alberta government, are at the energy round tables where they're supposed to be negotiating some of these clean energy regulations and emissions caps and whatnot. Jabot has taken a very hard line, but Minister Wilkinson has said that these are only starting points. And it seemed to me that what we're seeing is the beginnings of a federal opening gambit, if you will, on some of these energy issues that they've been having with Premier Smith.
Well, let's hope some economic pragmatism and reality squeaks in there from somewhere. I know not every Liberal on the seats is economically inept, but they sure seem quiet these days. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we let you go then, Sean?
Well, the other sneaker was the media bailout. They're adding another $130 million onto that. I think it was $595 million pot to bail out the legacy media. And it was buried fairly deep in the document. You had to kind of look for it. And there was about 3 little paragraphs about not only expanding the program, but extending it, it seems to me, indefinitely. And so that was a bit of an issue in the newsroom for us as well.
Well, absolutely. And yeah, we'll talk a bit about that further. So I'll let you get back to your tasks there and keeping up with all that. And I appreciate you checking in with us today, Sean.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks. So that was our Sean Paulzer. And yes, you go to the westernstandard.news to see more of his stories out there. He covers a lot of this beat quite well. And these interest payments, it's one thing that gets me to the left, where they feel that deficit financing is okay and borrowing is okay, yet they always love to swipe at big business and big corporations. I don't think it's mom and pop corner store lenders that are taking these interest payments. I'm pretty sure it's big business, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I mean, these, as we said, they're budget updates, they're snapshots. They don't pack too much in, but we read what we can into it. It looks, they got a bleak picture to work with here.
Yeah, so, but it's their fault. They got a bleak picture to
absolutely.
work with. It's like trying to watch an alcoholic solve their own problems.
Drink your way through it.
But boy, this is like we call it the hair of the dog budget, because we got into this mess by borrowing too much money. Now she's borrowing more to fix it.
Well, that's the infuriating thing too. I mean, it shows the economic illiteracy or deception, one of the two, probably a bit of both. When she gets up there and says, we're going to battle inflation, we're going to keep your cost of living down, and by doing that, we're going to borrow and print a whole pile of money.
Yeah.
Either they're denying that causes inflation, or they really actually don't know it.
And all their big money announcements for housing, and there is a housing crisis in this country, don't start until 2025, 26. So they're doing nothing at the moment for it.
Oh, well,
sounded good on the day, didn't it?
Yes.
Until you read the fine print.
It's not a budget thing as well, but I mean, if they want to take pressure off housing, we're starting seeing reports saying as much as well. They need to cut the immigration a little bit, but they won't talk that.
Actually, you do a bit of Airbnb, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Well, what does her update mean for you?
I don't believe it's going to impact us because we are in a rural area and it's part of the house we reside in. What they're going after with it are people who have standalone properties that they're letting out on Airbnb. And, if you own 4 houses, you use Airbnb to make more money out of them, things like that. But I think Jane might correct me on that, that we don't fall under that. But it's...
there they go, after a small businessman again.
Yes, it is. And it won't solve the housing problems. And if anything, when you look at that, if somebody has one property, they rent it, they say, well, fine, you know what, I'm out. I'm just going to sell it then. And the high price, now you have one, with such a much larger crisis in housing, it's just a drop in the bucket. They're just looking for villains to point at. Right. So it must be those Airbnb.
And we should note for the record, the Conservatives are going to vote nay, and the NDP lapdogs are going to vote aye. So no quick election.
No, we can't expect that. All right, well, let's go closer to home, get into Alberta. We got an interesting announcement. Dave, it looks like we might have more options for healthcare provision.
We do, but do we want to talk about the media bailout of the economic
I'm just looking
budget?
in the order we got going things here. Okay, fair enough.
Got to be able to move and go on the flow. So.
I noticed the headline is more money for our competitors, because it is a self-serving headline because we're ticked off, but rightly so. I think most Canadians should be with this whole ongoing bailout of media.
Yeah, another 129 million to the failing legacy media. And I'll just read you a couple of tweets here from people who know what they're talking about. The first being Michael Geist. Government now bailing out Canadian news outlets because of the disastrous bill C-18. It will now cover 35% of a reporter's wages from $55,000 to $85,000 a year. And they made it retroactive to the beginning of the year. In response, Peter Menzies, a former Calgary Sun sports editor, a former Calgary Herald publisher, a former CRTC vice chair, tweeted, "The government has essentially nationalized most of the government has nationalized most of Canada's media. This is a huge win for the hedge fund and a big blow to those who refuse the loot." That would be us. "Most journals can now thank Justin Trudeau for their paychecks. It's done."
This, I mean,
Does everybody understand about the hedge funds?
not necessarily. Maybe expand on it.
Well, that's the major news companies are owned by hedge funds based in the United States. So we think we're saving our democracy. We think we're keeping jobs for Canadian journalists. Well, I guess we are. But the boys are actually, whose investment is being protected here, are not even Canadians.
No, it's not small local outlets we're talking about. These are big fund owners who really are quite indifferent to the news content or any principles of journalism or getting anything out. It's just a hedge fund.
They're the ones that have hemorrhaged staff from the newsrooms of the country over the years to they're now basically barely existing.
Well, and just to tie it to another recent issue, this is the way it works with these subsidies too. They claim it's for domestic jobs, they always do, and things like that, but it rarely works that way. The layoffs are going to continue. The ostensible merger between the Sun and the Herald, as if it was going to make things better, didn't make two entities. It just made one ugly one. And like the battery plant, we find out, we're going to give billions for batteries, but we're going to bring in South Korean staff to work there.
So this is one way of making the newsrooms a little more culturally diverse. Is that what is this where you're going with this?
There's going to be a South Korean. Well, we are taking the subsidy, but somebody else different on the panel next week with a kimchi report. And I like kimchi, but that's a side note. We got to get a food show on here. Sam.
We do. Well, we do have Josh Andrus, our chief food correspondent.
That's true. He has covered a few.
He's covered a few things. Well, you've been on the road with him, I think.
Some of those panels.
I don't mind covering from out there. It needs to be in preparing it on camera.
Exactly.
One of those shows where everybody gets a bite to eat.
Exactly.
Then you got to pretend you like it, or not.
Or not.
But I mean, this is bad for me. It's just bad.
It came out the same week. I noticed, Cory, that the trust in news media has hit an all-time low.
Yeah.
And then bang, this comes out, and it's now, as Peter says, the journalists can thank Trudeau for their paycheck
and
every 2 weeks, and they will do so by not reporting bad things on it. Like when the most ridiculous headline I've seen this week was CBC talking about the South Koreans coming to Ontario to build the EV plant, and he blames Stephen Harper. CBC blames Stephen Harper because Stephen Harper signed a free trade deal with South Korea back in 2010. I mean, that's just one of the more blatant examples of the Trudeau ass kissing. But
well, if you want to talk about bad headlines, there was that other one reporting on that unfortunate Winnipeg woman who died in Israel, and they reported that she died as if she had just sort of fallen asleep in her bed, when in actual fact she was a victim of terrorism. And CBC won't even call Hamas terrorists. So what exactly?
It was CTV. In fairness, that blew the poor lady headline.
Yeah, but the CBC won't call them terrorists as well. And something interesting, I was driving this morning. I was listening to a radio host based out of Edmonton, and he referred to October 7th as being an activity carried out by Hamas militants. The word terrorism is getting dropped from the other newsrooms too. I mean, we expect it from the state broadcaster because we've never expected much out of the CBC. But this is chorus entertainment. Like, why is this liberal language going into every outlet?
Mark my words, by 24 hours from this very moment, that incident in Buffalo will be put down to bad driving.
Yes. Yeah, true, and it'll be because Harper changed some standards somewhere on the drivers.
And it goes right along with the lessening of responsibility to Hamas goes right along with the increased anti-Semitism being felt across North America.
No, I mean, I think these are the kinds of reasons that are destroying the credibility of the mainstream media. I have to admit that I have seen some good investigative reporting coming out of all places, the CBC. We have picked up on some of those stories. We have credited their sources, but they are so rare. That's the problem. And when it doesn't really matter how much the federal government now subsidizes our industry. people know it's subsidized, so
Oh, yeah.
they think it's bought and paid for.
The trust
And
gets
there
lost.
goes the trust.
And there are some good journalists in all of the outlets and papers still out there. I mean, a lot, but they're going to keep their heads down. A lot of them, the reason they're still there is they got bills to pay too. They got family to feed, and it's just, well, I don't know what else I can do. But the editor told me, don't shake that tree because, we've gotten some veiled, warnings from our bureaucrats in Ottawa for our next subsidy dive that we might not see, because that's going to happen.
With Poilievre soaring and Trudeau tanking in the polls, how worried do you think CBC staff are? Because they, if they get demonetized,
He's been sticking quite outright to saying he's going to defund the CBC. So, but it was part of what Menzies pointed out in his piece as well, was aside from the straight 1.4 billion given to the CBC every year out of the taxpayers' pockets, they steal, and I say it that way, because if you're subsidized that much and you're selling advertising on top of it, in my view, you're stealing advertising dollars from the private market. If they would just even get out of the advertising business, that would open up $400 million a year in advertising for other outlets to pursue and try to get contracts for. But they won't do that either.
No, and we'd happily accept some of that money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's honest money. It's
From
not subsidizing.
advertising.
We'd
Yeah,
have to go to the
from
advertiser and
advertising.
say, hey, this
exactly.
is what we're offering. The old form of an exchange of services for money. But now it's between politicians and media. And as I said, the trust gets broken further. So even good stories, people look at them with a jaded eye. They're not sure about this. And it's just a bad development all around. And the timing, too. I noticed that they make sure that this will be up for renewal after the next election.
Yes.
Yeah. No coincidence there. Okay, well, what else can we cover? We can afford to cover things around here still for now. Anyways, let me get back to where I was going.
Before you were so rudely interrupted.
Yes. The nurse practitioner.
Nurse practitioners, yes.
Steve.
Big interesting news in Alberta this morning, Cory, where Premier Smith and Health Minister LaGrange announced that licensed practical nurses will be able to open their own clinics and offer services. Now, the way I understand it, Nigel, and you may know better than me, you've got the registered nurses at one level, and then the licensed practical nurses are at another level, and then you get doctors. And apparently the licensed practical nurses can do 80% of what a doctor can do.
Well, that's what Daniel Smith's.
That's what Daniel Smith's news release says. So if I know the rural people are very happy with this, because if they get some nurse practitioners opening up in their communities, that's going to take a lot of pressure off. But as usual, Cory and Nigel, there'll be, the NDP is probably already screaming about it. Some unions are probably already screaming about it. But to me, it seems like a good idea.
Well, it sort of is and it isn't. On the principle that half a loaf is better than no bread, if you're in a location or if you're in a situation where you do not have, if you're not registered with a general practitioner, and a nurse practitioner will put you on her books.
Or his.
Are there male nurse practitioners?
I got to do my politically correct part.
Well, that's so like you, Cory.
Yes,
be politically correct.
Always.
At any rate, I'm gonna go out on a limb and I say that if they are 80%,
they are predominantly.
They are
this or identified as such.
If you can get one to take you, Cory,
yes,
and you can't get on the list for a general practitioner of either sex, you're going to do that because that's your best hope. If something happens at short notice and you've got to get it and you've got to see somebody now. I mean, the illustration we always think of is all of us who've had children is it's 11 o'clock at night, the baby won't go to sleep, seems like it's got colic, but just will not settle, is bawling and wailing, and your wife is just about ready to, bawl and wail herself. That's the time when you finally take the child down to emergency, and two things happen. They give the child a pill, and they reassure you that they're not going to die. It's going to be okay. And if you talk to doctors, you talk to medical practitioners, you talk to nurse practitioners or anybody, so much time in medicine is taken up with managing patient anxiety. There's no reason, to your point, why a nurse practitioner can't do that very well. My hesitation is that, first of all, I don't think the savings that the government is looking for is necessarily going to come from that, but much more to the point is that the sort of the training regime of the nurse practitioner includes a lot of things that are, how can I put it, touchy-feely. And you're there with something that is an unusual condition. Like, who sees malaria these days? Present in a small town in southern Alberta with a case of malaria that you picked up when you were overseas. You don't even know you've got it. You just know you feel terrible. Are they going to know you've got malaria? I don't know. Maybe they will, but
a doctor might not either, though. I mean,
yeah, doctors are. That's the thing. That's the difference in the training. The doctors get that stuff.
Because I'd rather, for example, the nurse looks with the crying baby and gives the baby Tylenol and assures the mother you're not a bad person. You're not a bad person. You're going to be perfectly fine, and sends them on their way. In the meantime, the emergency doctor who would have been tied up can deal with setting that broken arm from somebody who came in. And I'd like to think a lot of, I mean, there's competency levels of doctors and nurse practitioners that are all sorts of areas. But if you got guidelines, hopefully they would exercise judgment. You know, oh, that rash there, okay, we'll prescribe you a steroid cream, you know, or somebody drops their pants and that's not supposed to be growing there. Okay, you got to go see a doctor. That's outside of my scope. Yeah. And it could be a referral. I mean, look at it as a form of triage even. You know, if people understand too, you're not going to a full medical practitioner, you're going to somebody who can deal with that first level of treatment. I think it can really take pressure off. Might not save money, but part of our issue isn't so much the money necessarily. It's the fact that we're waiting so long to get in to be seen.
Yeah. And I don't know, when my kids had colic, I just gave them a soother dipped in scotch and they were out like a one thing that we should one thing that we should talk about is the funding. You did mention it. Question was asked today, you know, if they can do 80% of what a doctor does, are they going to get paid 80% of the doctor's wages? And the funding is still in negotiations. So as you say, how much they're going to save or how much it's going to cost is still up to be determined.
Yeah, I'm just happy to see some thinking outside of the box too. That we've been in a status quo with healthcare forever, and you know, we're spending more and more and more. Nobody, despite what the howls of unions claims, nobody's been cutting health spending for years and years. And the outcomes are getting worse. The waiting lists are getting longer. I mean, we need to try something. And Premier Smith has shown the courage to say, here is a potential solution. As you said, maybe it might not work out, but I see a whole lot of good potential in here. And she's willing to bring on the wrath of the nurses unions and possibly the health lawyers, and you know, and say let's give this a try.
I'm not sure that I'm sure the unions will make a fist just to, but deep down, this is something that nurses have been pushing for a very, very long time.
Absolutely.
And it has to do with status and professional recognition. You know,
they're very well-trained professionals. They can cover a lot of medical.
That's right. If they can cover 80%, that's pretty good.
Yeah, right. I think of other things. For example, I pay out of pocket to get my driver's license renewed every 2 years. I have to get a medical exam because I'm a class 4. Fine. And I pay my dollars for that. So it doesn't cost the system in dollars, but it still takes up the time. I have to have a physician, you know, take my blood pressure, check. Actually, it's usually a nurse who does all that anyways. It's a 5-minute quick thing with the physician, and it's a nurse who takes care of all the rest anyways. We could free up that 5 minutes even to the physician on what is pretty much just kind of a routine checkup. And again, theoretically dedicate that physician to something that may be more pressing.
Well, you need to go out to Springbank, get it done at the airport there. Then you're right outside the system altogether. Go and see Brendan Adams.
We'll talk about that later because I hate doing that appointment. It's coming up this February.
Yeah, well,
as you say, Cory,
you heard it here first.
Yeah. As you say, something needs to be done. It's nice to see something being done differently because there's no point spending the same amount of money doing the same stuff. Because that's the definition of insanity, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we're spinning our wheels.
Are they qualified to recognize insanity?
I mean, I'd also like to see some degree. I mean, somebody else I saw on Twitter said, "Oh, the doctors' associations and everybody will be upset too." But I'm not sure about that. It's not like they're short. They're not going to suddenly have a gap in spare time happening if this happens. I mean, there's going to be plenty of demand for their services, and maybe there'll be even a little bit of an element of competition. One of the things I saw down in the States when I was working in Hobbs, New Mexico, awful dusty spot on the Texas-New Mexico border, but there was a billboard for a hospital. It had a digital bottom and it gave the emergency wait time for the room at that hospital. It was them saying, if you're driving into town, you need something. Hey, it's 6 minutes right now, or it's 18. Maybe go to the other one. But they're trying to say, hey, we got good service. Come on in. And no, we're not going to get to the point of private hospitals advertising, putting billboards up here, but seeing more alternatives for people to choose from. I can only see that reducing some of the wait times for more of the immediate acute care.
Agreed.
Yeah, no issue there. So one of the things that is curious though is I wonder why recent medical grads are not interested in going into family medicine. Do you have a theory?
No,
You got a theory on everything.
I do on lots of things. That one I don't. It's getting outside of my scope finally there. So
Only maybe I could think of is that the specialties pay more.
Either that, or maybe they're just calling it family medicine as opposed to general practice. Even is like it sort of diminishes it. And people say, oh, I don't want to do family medicine. I want to be a surgeon. That's is there any element of that to it?
Different appeal, I guess. Yeah, and the
You're kind of
generalism.
interchangeable with a nurse practitioner. I don't know whether that's going to make people more anxious to participate or not.
I don't know. I mean, again, if that covers some of that general practitioner with the nurse practitioners, it does, because we're short of specialists. We certainly are.
Yeah.
That's when you really get into those weights, when you want to see a urologist or a cardiologist or some of those specialized. I mean, you could be 6 months, a year, or more, depending on what you need.
The nurse practitioner will see you now, Cory.
Well, great. And who knows, as you say, with that gender difference, maybe those prostate exams will be a little more.
Oh, don't go there.
Yes, they're talking that way. See, now none of them are going to see me. Oh, he's looking forward to this.
You were doing
this
so
guy.
well today in correcting Nigel and being politically correct. And
It's
now you've just
not my
now
fault
you've
where the
just
creator
shut it
put
down.
that thing. All right, let's move along then. That's as far as we need to go there. On to something still in poor taste, and that's the Human Rights Commission and one of their gems as usual. It's kind of almost an annual tradition in a lot of ways to have this sort of controversy, Dave.
It is. It was written about by our Linda Slobodian yesterday, uncovered by Blacklock's reporters. The Human Rights Commission says Christmas is discriminatory and colonialism because we're old white men and say Merry Christmas. It's utterly ridiculous. They're taking a run at Christmas. They're taking a run at Easter, obviously the two major religious holidays for Christians, because it's not inclusive enough and because it's discriminatory against other faiths and people. Just before Nigel explodes here, I just want to read one thing from Polling Canada. This was an interesting poll they did actually last year, December 11th, 2022. And they asked people who grew up as non-Christians, are you offended when people greet you with Merry Christmas? 92% said no, they're not offended. 8% said they were offended. So again, it's not really an issue that the Human Rights Commission has seemed to jump on and explode 6 weeks before Christmas. I mean, it's, as you say, Cory, it's an annual mess. They tend to drop upon us.
It's usually somewhere taking out a nativity scene or pulling out or saying we can't call it a Christmas tree in a place. The absurdity. But now we've got a government-funded agency that has delved into this. I mean, what remedy are they proposing too?
Well, they're not proposing anything at the moment. It's a statement. It's a policy paper. So the danger of these things is that other government agencies take that as a signal, and then will move in a way that people who admire and like Christmas won't appreciate. Christmas isn't going anywhere, and for two reasons. One is that people who believe in the gospel story are not going to let it go anywhere, and the other reason is that the entire economy depends upon, starting Black Friday and going through the New Year's sales. That month of which Christmas is the lynch point is what makes the year. If you are in small business, or you're selling whatever retail, Christmas is, if you don't make it then, you're not going to make it in the rest of the year. So there is going to be a period of celebration in the middle of December, and they can call it the Saturnalia if they want to go back to basics, because some people say that the Christians just appropriated that Roman holiday, changed the name, and nothing changed. So that could happen. But Christmas is not going anywhere. But I think these people are crazy. I also think they're malicious, but I am not anxious about the occasion.
I mean, from a secular viewpoint, it's a part of the culture. It's gone beyond religion to a whole lot of people. It's just part of something that's huge in North America and Europe. As part of a season, a long, dark winter, short days. We got things to look forward to. We got Christmas parties to look forward to. We've got, perhaps gifts exchanges if you want to take part in it, a meal, or even just a couple of days off. But it's a season. And again, if people can set aside their hangups, most people look forward to it and enjoy it, whether they're people of faith or not.
All the women here are looking forward to doing a gift exchange with you, Cory. I mean, I don't know what your magic is, but anyway.
They don't understand how cheap I really am.
We're all apparently talking about getting edible underwear.
All those things.
Don't you go where he's already gone. Look, I think their point was that just to be serious for about 5 seconds, is that they said, well, look, Christmas is a religious holiday, and it's the only religious holiday that is recognized in the Canadian calendar. Like, you don't get days off for Ramadan, you don't get days off for.
Well, you do for Easter.
For Easter, yeah.
Well, I'm reciting from what they said, but you know. This is so. Yeah, you're right. But again, I mean, this is just more evidence of how Christianity has hijacked the calendar in their eyes, and that is discriminatory, and it's worse than discriminatory because it's sort of white people, as though black people and brown people never, and Chinese people never go Christmas shopping and give each other gifts at Christmas and actually believe in Christmas.
As Cory said, even if you don't believe in Christmas, even if you're not a Christian, you can still use the season to have a couple extra days off.
Absolutely.
You can get your family together and celebrate whatever you know. So there's not anybody that doesn't benefit from the Christmas.
No, and it's evolved to other practices. Like there's a Jewish practice, particularly in New York, of going for Chinese food on Christmas Day for supper. And the reason for it was way back when things were much more regulated. You couldn't find anything open on Christmas Day. We remember that even up here. But if you were Jewish and you weren't observing, the only other places that were open were Chinese restaurants because they weren't Christian either. So it just turned into, we'll go there. The Chinese now look forward to a large Jewish turnout. It's just another tradition that's it's tied to the Christian holiday originally, but nobody's offended. Nobody's having a bad time. It's always white, liberal, purple-haired busybodies that make these stupid statements. It's nothing to do with the sorry,
No, go ahead.
No, you were so right when you said that 90% of people are not offended. 92%, I think, was your number. And it's like you say, it's white liberal atheists who actually turn you down and try to get you canceled when you put up a Christmas tree or.
Yeah, but you see, there's white libertarian atheists like me. I have no problem with it. I don't feel insecure so much that if somebody wishes me Merry Christmas or Happy Ramadan or anything like that, that it's offending my.
How do you reply? How do you reply if I wish you Merry Christmas?
Merry Christmas to you too, or thank you. It's a well wish. I will take it. I appreciate it. It's wishing me to have a good time. Why would I be offended?
Yeah,
the world needs to lighten up.
Big time.
Speak the word. So I still have to get you a present?
Well, just check the ticket. Maybe you drew Michelle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'd be easier for you.
The Secret Santa. We should remind everybody, we got a couple of minutes left here. I mean, a great gift you can give people is the gift of independent media. And this is the time to remind people, we aren't taking those bailouts, guys. We rely on you subscribers. So I'm going to kind of nag you. And, this is another idea for something you can do. There's nothing wrong with that. Buy a subscription for the Standard on behalf of somebody else. They can have their login and their email. And,
how much is a subscription?
Well, since you happen to be asking, hey, it's $10 a month or $99 for a year. I mean, talking about good deal. Volume discount.
That's just the price of an old newspaper, isn't it?
That's right. And you don't have that pile of newspapers to get rid of later on.
We are environmentally friendly.
It is a digital product.
And if you've got a favorite uncle who loves the liberals and the left wing, get him a subscription that show him the error of his ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to set off the purple-haired person who hates Christmas, a card with the receipt showing I have bought a subscription with the System Standard on behalf of you. Merry Christmas. May, my blessings.
Mhm.
Come on, have fun with it, guys. And it helps us. I mean, I'm only being half joking with this. This is a good time. It's a potential gift. It's the digital world. I mean, you should still go out shopping or handcraft something for somebody or whatnot, but a standard subscription won't hurt either.
Yep.
And hey,
you can't even go to the movies for what you pay for $10. I think movies pretty much $15 now.
Oh, gosh,
Popcorn's more than that.
crazy. Yeah, they make their money out of the popcorn experience. Look, the theaters have really gotten great with those lounge chairs and things where you can make a whole night of it now, though. But
it's expensive. It's like
it is
more than
It's-
$20
it's
for one of those seats, and $10 a beer, and $15 for a popcorn.
It's nothing you can do often on an independent media member budget. So hey, we accept gifts too. If you want to send movie passes our ways,
Yeah, really.
we could all use a night out now and then.
Attention,
Plus, we gotta
Landmark
like-
Cinemas.
Yeah,
Landmark
that
Cinemas,
one up
come
in the
in.
Northwest is a great place to be.
All right. Well, we know in this place nobody's going to be shy from any of that sort of thing. So we will wish people Merry Christmas. And again, if it's Ramadan, anything else, I'm more than happy to take the well wishes and greetings.
Well, don't forget Hanukkah. That's coming right up,
Hanukkah.
too. You should know that.
I know it's coming. I'm not good at practicing any religion, despite
So you don't have the beanie?
what again?
The
Yarmulke?
yarmulke?
No, I bought a Detroit Lions one for my oldest son because he's a Lions fan. It seems to have worked. They're doing well this year.
They are. They're likely to make the playoffs.
We'll see if the Steelers sure aren't going anywhere. Okay, on that sad note, I think we're out of time. So thank you very much, Nigel, Dave, and everybody else for tuning in. Keep watching. We appreciate it. And Merry Christmas in advance. I'll see you next week at this time.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99